What's going on, guys? So we got this 2001 Acura RSX that we're going to do a leak down test on it before we throw a turbo on it to ensure everything is healthy. Going to document this test really quick for people that are unsure what a leak down test is or how it is performed. So right here we have our tester with the hose. Our hose is going to hook up right in here, and then our air compressor is going to hook into over here. So what we're doing is we're going to take a spark plug out, which you're going to see here shortly. And when we take a spark plug out, we're going to hit this gauge with 100 psi, and the percentage of leakage will come out to here. And you can see 0 to 10% is what we're shooting for. Even freshly built motors will be in this range. Of course, if you have a little bit more than this, it's still a low number. Trying to get the glare off. There you go. It's still a low number, but it's, sign for a little bit of a concern maybe. We want to make sure all the cylinders kind of look fairly the same as well. That's a big thing. If you got one cylinder that's extremely high and the other ones are low, well, then something's going on with that. This is basically going to help us determine to see if we have leakage from the cylinder head or the bottom end. And when we do hook everything up, which you're going to see here shortly, if we do have leakage, I'm going to show you in a second how to find out where it's coming from. So I just pulled the spark plugs out along with the coil unplugs. If you noticed in the video, what I did was actually I marked the coils, and you'll see on the top each one is marked 1, 2, 3, and 4. So basically what this is doing is if we do have an issue with a cylinder, let's say we got a high number in a cylinder, this will help we can start and kind of pinpoint why we have an issue with that cylinder. Instead of just taking everything apart, just like mixing it up, we got the corresponding spark plugs per the cylinder. See the labels down here. All the spark plugs look fairly similar and decent. So we're hoping that we have little to no leakage on this motor. But if we do, let's say cylinder number 1 is higher than the rest. We want to figure out why. We want to figure out what happened. Is there an underlying issue? Is that cylinder, detonating or knocking, causing that cylinder to get wiped out? Little stuff like this helps if we do have high leakage on a cylinder. Or, it also helps, we've talked about this before about numbering the coils. If we see one cylinder or 2 cylinders having high counts of knock, one of the things that we do is we can swap a coil, see if we got a weak coil. If we swap this coil with this coil and the knock follows, well then, maybe it's as simple as a weak coil. So take your time whenever doing stuff like this. It's going to help you in the long run. So we got the spark plugs removed. Turn the wheel all the way this way. We're going to get a ratchet and a socket on the crank pulley so we can rotate it over by hand. What we're aiming to do is to get cylinder 1 at top dead center on the compression stroke. If you're not familiar with the strokes of a motor, you can go Google that and look that up, but basically there's going to be 2 times when this cylinder can be at top dead center. We want the compression stroke. If you're not on the compression stroke, you're just going to have a high amount of leakage. rotate the motor over one full cycle, then you'll have the correct stroke that you want. What we use here to find top dead center is going to be this piece of aluminum filler rod. This will help us. We're going to stick it in the cylinder very gently. It is aluminum, so it's not really going to damage anything, but we pay attention to make sure it's going to be moving up and down, which you're going to see here shortly. We'll bend the top to make it a little bit easier to see. And then, ultimately, once we find the correct position for this, it's going to be, well, when we're talking about top dead center, the next cylinder on the right stroke is going to be like any Honda that fires. It's going to be 1, 3, 4, 2. So we're going to do this cylinder, and then we're going to do cylinder number 3, and then we're going to do cylinder number 4, and then we're going to do cylinder number 2. The reason I mention this, it's going to minimize how many times you have to rotate the motor over by hand. Not a huge deal, but if you're not trying to work that muscle group, or you're trying to do this, I won't say relatively quick, but that's just a little, I guess, a little tidbit or whatnot I can toss in. Of course, if you have your valve cover off, you can always see top dead center with the cam gears as well, so you don't need this. You can use anything too. I've seen guys use long screwdrivers, put some tape at the end. You know, you don't have to overcomplicate the process. A couple things I want to mention, and you just saw really quick how we found top dead center in that cylinder. If you remove all the spark plugs at once, it's going to be easier to rotate the motor over by hand because your motor's not building compression. The other thing too is when you do the leak down test, you can see our ratchet is down here, goes in the little hole. You might have to have somebody hold this ratchet so it doesn't spin. Sometimes some motors, when you pump air into the cylinders, they do want to spin over. So keep that in mind. The other thing too, before I forget, is if you're doing a leak down test, it will can also show signs if you're having a head gasket issue. Is take the radiator cap off, and when you pressurize the system with the leak down tester, if you got a bad seeping head gasket, the coolant will actually rise up a little bit. So we're going to also make sure this is off during this test. And we're going to keep an eye on the coolant level. So the air compressor just shut off, and we have our leak down tester hooked up to cylinder 1. What I wanted to mention really quick was, if you go and feed this air pressure and you have a crazy amount of leakage, let's say 100%, there's a good possibility where this is at the wrong top dead center stroke. When this is at the wrong top dead center stroke on cylinder 1, cylinder number 4 is going to be at the right stroke and top dead center. So basically you got two options. You can either rotate the motor one full cycle, and then cylinder 1 will be at top dead center on the correct stroke, or you can just unhook your gauge and bring it over to cylinder number 4. Same thing for 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are going to be at top dead center at the same time. One of them is going to be on the correct stroke though. So just a little tidbit or a little whatever helpful hint. I'm going to try to position the camera over the gauges, and I'm going to hold the ratchet in case it wants to spin, and we will see what cylinder number 1 has. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out, and hopefully you guys captured that, or hopefully the video captured that, and you saw as we were feeding air pressure into the cylinder, the leak down gauge went to 0. That's exactly what we want to see, and what we want to aim for on each cylinder. So cylinder number 1 is good. What we're going to do now is move it over to cylinder number 3, because that's going to be the next cylinder at top dead center that will be on the correct stroke. If you're confused by that, just remember the firing order. That's how we're shooting for. If we do have some leakage, I'm going to see if the ratchet will hold itself, where I can basically take the camera and see if you can hear a change in the hissing noise. If you do have a hissing or air leaking or whatnot, there's a couple ways to check, bottom end or head. You could take off the oil cap or the dipstick. You can literally feel for air coming out of that area. If you have a leaky valve, like an exhaust valve, you can actually hear it from the tip of the muffler. If you have a leaky intake valve, you can hear it through the intake. So this is one of these tests too where it's important to be very quiet in the shop, so you can hear where the leak is coming from and, you know, pinpoint it and go from there. Okay, so I had to stop the video really quick, and you see some pressure still in the system. This cylinder is going to be really, really healthy, just like the other one. This cylinder really wants to rotate over the ratchet, and I couldn't hold it with just one hand, so I'm going to figure out a better way to hold it. Normally I'd have one of the techs come over and help me with this. I'm here alone today though, so give me a second. Hopefully you're able to see that. I got a breaker bar now with another extension sticking out. I'm able to hold it with my foot. That cylinder definitely wanted to rotate over, so yeah, so far cylinder 1 and 3 are perfect. Let's see what 2 and 4 hold. So you see cylinder number 4 is good to go. If you saw the little jump in the gauge there, basically the motor is trying to rotate over, and my foot is holding it from not rotating. So one of the things too to be careful with, and if it's like your first time doing this, if this does want to rotate over and you're not careful, it can do some harm on your wrists. So be careful with that. On to the last cylinder. So there you go, guys. This motor has 0% leakage across the board. Give it a thumbs up. Time for some boost. Hopefully this video was informative. Of course, if you got questions, comment down below or shoot us a message. Hopefully I included everything that if you do have a cylinder that is leaking, how to find it. But as I just said, feel free to contact me and I'll help you out. Take care, guys.